Welcome to the Govtech Academy.
All right, Justin, let's talk about how we create a repeatable playbook, even in the earliest days of a company. How do they go to market in a way that they can scale?
Love it. I'll talk through the different stages, and I could also talk a little bit about the common mistakes that I see kind of founders make. Let's start at sort of the earliest stage, which is just really identifying your ideal customer profile, understanding your customers. The most common mistake that Govtech founders sort of make is they think of the end user being sort of the citizen, or they think of the end user maybe as the student, and they come up with maybe some sort of solution oriented around the citizen or the student without really understanding how the government official actually thinks about this problem. And what I most commonly see is that folks will kind of go and wireframe or create some sort of solution and be like, oh, this is what we imagine someone in the government might actually want. When I would say in reality, the best way to really learn is you need to go talk to a lot of these folks.
So many people.
So many.
If you feel like you've talked to too many, you haven't talked to enough.
Yeah, so I'll give a story. In my first company, CourseDog, we did this where we went and we wireframed the whole thing. We brought it to who we thought were buyers, and they were like, oh, this is cool, but they didn't really want to buy it. Yeah. What we then did is we kind of realized, and this is what I always coach founders on, that you really should not spend any time sort of hypothesizing about your business model or your product until you really deeply understand the problem. And so what we would do is we spent a summer, we literally would lock ourselves into a room and we just cold called this one persona called the registrar nonstop for 7 hours a day. And all we would do is we just call them and we'd be like, hey, what are the challenges that you have with scheduling? What are the challenges you're facing with that? Oh, if you were to hire a full-time person to do that for you, what would they actually be working on? We learned through that process so much. And the biggest thing that I see in kind of early stage GovTech founders is they didn't really do the work, right?
It's like the hammer in search of a nail. You've got this great solution. You've identified a problem because you're a citizen who has experienced, hypothetically, let's say the DMV, which we all, no offense to DMV, it's a rough process in a lot of places, but you've identified a problem because you as the end user are uncomfortable in a situation, but you don't understand the process that's interacting with you. And sometimes that process works okay. And the people in the government are like, this is really easy. I know how to use this. This is a simple system. It talks to these other systems. And the end user experience, while of course is always interesting and important to government, isn't necessarily always existential in what they buy.
One of the great parts about this market is that folks will talk to you. So if you just get on the phone and call or send a ton of emails, ideally you're doing a combination of the both. And you just say hey, you're not selling a solution in the beginning. Hey, I just want to learn about this challenge. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to research it. You will be shocked at how many folks will actually respond if you're kind of earnest about your intentions. Government officials are generally very good folks. And they want to be able to help if they can, right?
People go into government because they want to help
Exactly.
Not because they love navigating bureaucratic
Exactly.
systems.
So I would start everything there. And what I always tell folks is also you need to, and I emphasize this so much because I see where it goes wrong, do not do 2 calls and then go into product building. If someone else had transmuted into my body in the early stages of
Very
CourseDog,
Freaky Friday.
Yeah. They had fully taken on my body. And if they had done the 50 really good, high quality, 20-minute calls with folks that were in my body, anyone could have built the company from then on. I honestly believe that. I had no skills. I could barely code. I think your average person could have looked at this document and said, oh, there's a problem here, and it can be solved by, they mentioned problem ABC. We should fix problem ABC. And that was the whole company, right?
Yeah.
And most folks just skip doing the work.
And I think to your point, there is something about a cold calling outreach.
Yes.
Government systems don't always do inbound email, and we're going to get to how AI can sort of support some of that. But I think that actually talking to a person and asking for their time and being polite and introducing yourself and talking about the project that you're working on and showing curiosity opens unbelievable doors.
Yes.
They want to talk to people. They don't necessarily want to write it all out in an email. And frankly, you'll get more honest answers if you're doing it on the phone too. So if you're an early stage founder and you're doing market research, pick up the phone.
100%.
Yeah.
And what I say to folks is folks ask, well, does this mean it's going to be a business? Not necessarily, but you will learn whether the space that you are interested in exploring, its problems and adjacent problems are either real problems that can be solved by you, or they're not problems, right? And this process will definitely help you to pick one of those two. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think another interesting outcome of all of that customer insight and research, first of all, as an investor, it's one of the first questions I ask all my companies. How many of your customers have you talked to?
Right.
And then it's really important to start pattern matching, right? If you're starting to talk to all these people, you're talking to 25, 50, 100 people, you're starting to hone in on a product that solves their problems, but you're also starting to hone in on the customer who's going to be ready for your product right now. And that saves so much time in Govtech.
Yes, 100%. I completely agree. And so, I think that you keep running this process until a door seems pretty obviously open.
Yes.
Like, I think that most folks think of this startup creation process as this act of grandeur. Again, I would say that it was not, there should not be, you will have that an insight perhaps throughout the course of your calls, but after you do the work, it should be clear at least the next step forward. You don't need to work, in my opinion at least, you don't need to have everything worked out, where's the big vision, do a crazy, here's I think that what is most important is that you have the information that is needed for you to then take a step forward, which to me is a low fidelity experiment to help validate that the problem that you've identified is something that people are willing to pay in order to solve.
And I would argue too that you're in this cold calling mechanism, a problem set is becoming really, really clear through all these conversations.
Yep.
But there's a human relational element here too, which is you've actually talked to a lot of potential customers. So your follow-up is really important.
Yes.
Sending a follow-up email that says, thank you so much for the time. We're really appreciative of your insights. If you don't mind, we'd love to follow up when we put this together.
That is such a great point.
You keep it warm throughout all of these things, because to have a call and then 6 or 12 months later when you have a product to call that person back and expect them to remember who you are is not a great go-to-market motion.
That's a great point. So in my case, when I first chatted with folks, I really want to understand their problem. At the end of that call, I would say, hey, probably around the 20th or the 25th call, I'd start asking, hey, you mentioned problem ABC. I've heard this problem from other folks as well. If someone were to solve ABC, curious, is that something that you feel like there could be that someone should build a solution for? And I would oftentimes get answers yeah, that would be amazing. And then I would follow up in my email and I'd be like, hey, we're going to start working on something. Would love to follow up with you when we get closer. But you're exactly correct. What's super important is that you're not selling them, trying to get from the get-go. You don't even understand the problem. And then these relationships you can use in the future when you go and sell your product. Yeah.
And I guess I would say that sort of activity of inbound, asking questions, curiosity, trying to match problem set with solution is actually the long-term sales strategy too, right? That's practice for your go-to-market motion really indefinitely. And even when you have a product, you're no longer calling and selling. You're still leading with those questions. You're still leading with the pattern matching. You're still talking about how their day-to-day works, and then we just happen to have a solution for that.
100%. And the big thing that I would encourage folks on is the decision of whether, after doing all these calls, there's something out of it or whatever it is this concept of pull. When folks start to be like, oh, this is so challenging, or they follow up with you, or all of these little things, it should not be unobvious, in my opinion. Very few GovTech products are unobvious, there's an unobvious pain. Usually, most agencies are so underwater with so much bureaucracy and so much to do that they can't tackle the 70th potential problem on their list.
Oh my God, they can't even tackle their 5th.
And it will be obvious, right?
Yes.
In my opinion, if you're not sure, it's probably not even worth running the experiment of validation. You might learn something from that, but more commonly, I think you should go deeper into that problem.
The burning platform problem.
Exactly.
So phase one, you're calling 50 customers.
Yes.
You're getting to know the problem set. Something becomes really the burning platform question where you're I have an obvious in here.
Exactly.
What next?
Yeah, so I think stage 2 is really about come up with a very simple hypothesis. Agencies have problem or schools have problem ABC. We're going to try to solve ABC. And what I think about is what is the lowest fidelity way to test that? So I think in modern days, it might be rather than build some whole application or something of the sort, go on Lovable or use Claude Code or
Less
just
those
come up
tools.
with a very simple working prototype of your product and bring it back to those folks and say, hey, you told me about problems ABC, right? I'm curious, like we are working on developing this. How are you thinking about this? Curious your thoughts, right? And I ask a lot of curious questions, right?
We're all curious.
We're not
just here
selling,
to be curious.
exactly.
We don't
We're
have any
curious,
products.
exactly.
We're just here to figure out what makes your day hard, Brenda.
Exactly. And
yes.
the resonance of the feedback that you get should be correlated with how much fidelity you create of your product. So what I mean by that is, if you go and they're like, this is cool, like, you know, or they probably won't say that. They'll probably be like, oh, like this is great.
This is really interesting. Thanks for showing it to me.
Look,
and then they will
let's
never
follow up
email
in
you
6
back.
months. Right.
They
that
will
means
never
scrap
email you
it.
back.
Scrap
Yes,
it. Don't
I agree.
go build some whole thing,
You
right?
haven't built something that they need to buy right now because you've actually really solved the problem.
Exactly. So when you're going to start to feel pull is when you get into those first couple of calls, they're going to be asking you for the next thing, right? They're going to be completing your sentence. That's where you want to feel. And as that happens, you want to create more fidelity. So if folks say, wow, this is super exciting, then you want to build more product. You want to get closer to the working version. And it should really be the investment that you make in the product should be correlated with the amount of pull that the market is driving you.
Yes.
If you're at the point where people are like, yes, I need this thing tomorrow, you
Can
need
it
to
do this?
shift
Can it do
to
this?
build
Can it
mode.
do this? Can it
Exactly.
do this?
Build,
Yes.
build. Until you get there, do not build. Do not build. That is the biggest mistake. Do not build.
Lesson 1, don't build.
Don't build anything. They will pay. And I will tell you just a small thing. In my first company at CourseHog, we sold $1 million of software before we had a server. Everything was wires. Wire this, wire that. We wired a whole algorithm of how you would solve room scheduling. It was literally a loading bar that would be like, ooh, that we set a timer on, 2 minutes, and it would spit out this thing. $1 million. We didn't have any product. And we were very clear about that, right? But that, I'm not saying, that's an extreme example.
Was it people were like, you have solved this, and when it's ready, I'm in?
So what was great, and this is what I always coach folks on, is that when you build a product for governments or schools, there's oftentimes a lag between when someone is like, I am ready to buy something, and we'll talk more about this later, to bought, to ready to implement. This cycle is your time to build. Right? In my opinion, right?
You better
now,
work those keys really fast.
You need to be clear. Yeah, exactly. You need to be clear about what you have today and where you're going. But in my opinion, great products can sell on vision, and your time there is what you can use to actually build.